Good morning, and we are live. Coffee with Rich on a beautiful Friday morning, December the 4th, 2020. This year, folks, is almost over. This morning, I've got a very special guest. I'm very excited to have on Cecil Burch of Immediate Action Combatives, among many other accolades. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask Cecil to introduce himself to the audience. But before I do, I got to do some housekeeping. Let's make sure that we are live on Facebook. Let's see, I don't have a notification yet, so that must mean we're not. Let's see. Oh, yeah, we got the first person jumping on this morning. Please like and share. Excuse me. I know we're running late this morning on Coffee with the Rich, but I want to be respectful of Cecil's time. It's very early where he is this morning. Guys, listen, if you want to find out more about Cecil Burch, in the links to the show notes today, I've got a link to Immediate Action Combatives. Also, we had Cecil on our podcast, The American Warrior Show, which is America's #1 self-defense podcast. And we've had other folks from the ShivWorks Collective as well. But if you want to check out the show where Cecil was on, you can find it in the links below. Thank you to everyone that's going to join me today. And thank you for everyone that will watch the replays, because we got a lot to cover with Cecil today. Please like and share. Cecil, good morning, sir.
Good morning. How's it going, Rich?
It's going well, brother. It's going well. I know it's early where you're at, my friend.
Yeah, whatever. I can gripe about it, but I just get up, do it. If this is what it takes to talk to you and hang out and talk about cool stuff, then I'll sacrifice myself a little bit.
Well, I appreciate it, brother. We got 9 folks joining us live. If you are joining us this morning, please like and share. We got Jeff, my brother, who just retired from the Coast Guard. Good morning, Jeff. He is on. It was great to see you the other day here in Tennessee. Mike is on. He says coin number 1122. If you don't know what a coin number is, then you're going to have to check out AmericanWarriorSociety.com and find out more. Gerald is on out in Oregon, coin number 952. William Literal is on. Good morning, sir. And Will Parker at Montana. Please hit that share button. You're not going to want to miss today's show. Cecil, so if you could, sir, tell us a little bit, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and give us your background and stuff, if you don't mind.
Sure. Basically I've been doing some form of hand-to-hand fighting for 41 years now. I pretty much trained everything at this point. Some of it pretty extensive. Some I got instructor creds and a lot of like Filipino and Indonesian systems and stuff. And some I just kind of did in passing because I was a martial art geek, so I tried to train in everything, whatever sounded good, whatever article I saw in Black Belt magazine that said this is a super deadly art. I had to figure out a way to train it at some point. I did a lot of Filipino and Indonesian martial arts. That was my big thing, probably through most of the 80s and 90s. I was a big knife nerd. I loved doing that kind of stuff. I bought my first Spyderco, the second model they ever did, in like 1984. I was in college and I had literally no money. I didn't date for 2 months, 3 months. I didn't date. I didn't do any of the hanging out at the bars with the rugby team. I was like, I got to save money to buy this Spyderco police model. But I've carried one since that day, carried something since that day. The last 20, there you go. Exactly. I ended up I ended up going to the Delica as my main carry for a lot of time, because I thought it was such a good general utility thing. That police model was cool, but God, it was heavy as hell. As a college student, who cares? Because I'm wearing, gross scrub clothes anyway, right? But once you start getting the real world, you got to be a little more thoughtful about that kind of stuff. Pretty much, I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-jitsu since 1989. I started doing Savate right before that, probably a year or two before that, and Thai boxing a couple years before that. That's pretty much been my focus the last 25 years or so, what people call the combat sports, boxing, wrestling, and Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. And when I say boxing and wrestling, I use that as an umbrella term, to cover all those similar type arts. I've competed in a bunch of mostly jiu-jitsu. I did a couple boxing smokers when I was in college. That's why I never broke my nose. I'm extremely proud. I'm like Rocky. I'm very proud that I never broke my nose, but there's this major divot where my nose kind of goes boop, boop. And that's from boxing. That's literally all from boxing. I did that. I did a little judo competition because when I started jiu-jitsu, there was no jiu-jitsu competitions in the United States, zero. So we just had to do the local judo guys, and they hated us. They despised us so much because they were all, you know, they want to do their cool throws, which we would do the throws because my instructor is a longtime judoka. So we do the throws, but we didn't stop there. We kept going, and they hated that. I've done Brazilian Jiu-jitsu competitions for a long time now. And I've been teaching since 87. And I've been traveling around doing seminars since, I think, in my 15th or 16th year of doing seminars. And I try to do it. A lot of the last 20 years has been trying to figure out how this all works together in a modern, realistic paradigm, including weapons and multiple opponents, and how it all works together and how to train it. So that's basically been my focus.
I was going to say, and yeah, that's really where I think that you stand out, because you're not just a third degree black belt. You're not just a competitor, but you're also a shooter. And the integration between those things, between the striking, between the grappling, between the guns and the edge weapons, how does all this stuff fit together? I know that, Seeklander and I played around with this in the early 90s when we were both law enforcement officers and special operations officers with the sheriff's department. And, we had some students and we played around with it, and we never could solve the problem, and eventually just kind of shook our heads and walked away from it a little bit at the time. But, that's where you and Craig and some of the other folks have really, you didn't let go of it. Once you had your teeth in it, man, you stayed with it until you kind of, I think, solved the problem as good as anybody, wouldn't you say?
Well, I think, I don't want to say we've solved the problem. I think we've got to best practices.
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep an open mind that we haven't figured it all out, that maybe we missed something, or maybe there's something still out there that we haven't seen yet that, hey, maybe there's something. But I think we're at best practices as far, up to now. Like, we have a pretty good handle on the best way to do it right now. Currently, we have a good handle on the best way to train it right now, but I don't think it's done. I don't know. I don't want to be that martial art guy who, I'm done now. So now I will sit here in a corner in a chair and I will be the grandmaster super sensei, and all the chi will go to my belly, and you just have to take my word as invalid, So it's still an ongoing process for sure.
I like that, because it's like, yeah, you've got some good protocols for it, but at the same time, you're not levitating above the ground or around the rest of us.
Well, and you look at it, it's not any different than shooting as far as we know today, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so Cooper by, mid 70s had the modern technique fairly, cataloged.
Yeah.
And it was good, but it didn't mean it was everything. And then you had the competitors come, and you had that change. And then we had a global war on terror, and that sort of, spurred even more. And now 2020, we're at a pretty good level of understanding of shooting. That, are we light years beyond what Cooper did? Probably not, but we're still that next stage. And I kind of like to think that hopefully we'll do the same thing. Part of what me and the guys are doing actively is mentoring new people, people coming up and doing it. We're encouraging these guys to go out there and go, you keep doing this too. Because number one, I don't know how long I can keep doing this, because it's physical.
Yeah.
Right. Teaching an 18-hour seminar over 2 days of, clinch and groundwork and weapon stuff. It's hard. Yeah. I'm 56. Can I do this? I could do this another 5-10 years for sure. Traveling around and doing it. Can I do it longer than that? I don't know, but it still needs to be. I want that next gen coming up and going, hey, Cecil, that was really good work you and the guys did, but look at what we're doing now. I'd like to sit back and go, dang, that was really good. Look, man, look where you guys have taken this.
Yeah.
which I think that older generation of shooters, like I'm friends with Masad Ayub, and he loves talking about the newer generation, Seeklander and, Todd Green and Ernest Langdon. He loves talking, Mike Pannone. He loves talking about those guys and going, look where they've taken this.
Yeah, yeah. I want to get into some of this because you keep talking about the guys, and I want you to introduce the collective here in just a moment. But before we do, let's say good morning to the 34 folks that are joining us live on this early Friday morning, December the 4th. Thank you to everybody that's joining Cecil Burch and I live this morning, and thank you to all those that will watch the replays in the days and weeks to come. Alan Kelly is on. He says, good morning from occupied Virginia. Good morning, Alan. Alan's a retired Virginia State Trooper. Good morning. Okay. John is on from Yukon, Oklahoma. Brett is on, another law enforcement officer, retired out there in California. Robert is on from Northern Kentucky. Good morning. Dana from Flowery Branch, Georgia. Good morning. Gerald is on. Phil is on. Walt, Terry. A lot of folks joining us this morning. Mr. Mike Seeklander is on.
Oh, really? All right, let's make fun of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Hey, Cecil, you mentioned the guys. If you could kind of introduce the gang and maybe tell us a little bit about how you got associated with Mr. Craig Douglas and the rest of the folks out there.
Oh, okay. So we call ourselves the ShivWorks Collective, and that was mostly because Craig has an ego, so we had to call it after him. No, that's not true. That's not true. I just had to take a shot. So it's 6 of us. So it's me, Craig Douglas, Chris Fry, Larry Lindeman, Paul Sharp, and it did include William April. It's funny. The reason, a lot of people, there's been groups trying to copy us because they have this thing like, oh, you guys got together and you have this business model and you're a group and you work together. It's like, no, that's not how it happened. What we did was, like, as you said, there were a few people who tried to do this early in the 90s and stuff like that, but sort of petered away. Part of why it peters away is because there's no support, right? You go on, nobody's doing this. Nobody wants to talk to you about it. Nobody wants to listen to you when you say, hey, we're trying to figure out how to get a gun out while we're in a hand-to-hand. I was like, people are like, what? Why are you doing that? That's why I had a very nationally known firearms trainer who told me in a group of people at a conference, the reason I carry a gun is so I don't have to do that stuff. It's like, you're kind of missing the point, dude. But that was what we got in the, I've been on the internet since the early days, right? Prodigy, CompuServe, AOL stuff. So doing all those, the Prodigy boards and AOL folders. And, you try to go on the martial arts side and say, hey, we should look at guns. Or you go to the gun side, hey, we need to look at hand-to-hand. And they're like, boo, hiss, boo, you're Satan, get out of here. And so you start to gravitate towards those people who are kind of interested in the same thing. So I've known Paul Sharp since probably late 90s, 98, 99. And I knew Craig. I just stumbled over Craig not too long after that. He still wasn't teaching publicly, but he was kind of talking online about some of the stuff they were doing. And so I started talking to them. And Paul and Craig had already met too, had already known each other. So they were already talking. So I'm talking to the two of them. And then Chris Fry comes in. He was one of Craig's first students. Like, Chris saw what Craig was doing and said, I got to do this. And he flew down to Mississippi and was his training partners were Craig's SWAT team guys. So he called in the SWAT team guys and said, hey, I need you to beat up this guy from New York, right? For 3 days. That's how tough Chris is. And then Larry Lindeman and William April, who William was in Craig's first public class he ever taught in Louisiana, that Paul Gomez organized. And so all of us started talking to each other, and we kind of discovered we were really in sync on some important stuff. Like, not that we agree with everybody on everything, right? We all argue, we all have our disagreements. I'm always right and they're always wrong, but still, we've got these little things, but the important stuff we agree on, right? So kind of what it came down to is we ended up with this mantra that we that kind of is our core. And it's be honest to the problem, right? You know, it's this fighting thing or this situation. Be honest about it. Be honest about the problems of it, and be honest about how how the realistic thing. Don't just say, oh, well, I'm going to, pull my gun and it will fix the problem. Be honest to the problem and then do the work. Do the work to solve that problem. And now everybody throws around that term, do the work. Now, do the work. Yeah, but go back to 2003, 2004. Nobody was saying that, right? That was us saying, you've got to work on this stuff. And so we agreed on that. And the more we talked, the more we discussed things, the more we became really close friends. That's literally what it was. Those 5 guys are 5 of my closest, dearest friends on the planet. And there was no plan to do it. There was no, and certainly Craig irritates me at times because, he's a diva, right? He's a diva and everybody's important, He's got to try to teach me how to dress and all that kind of stuff. But they're literally are my dearest friends. Like if I know any of them, I call up, man, I killed somebody. The first words out of their mouth is, okay, don't touch the stuff. Let's set up your alibi. And then I'm catching the red eye and we'll help you bury it. No questions asked, nothing, right? Those are the guys I can do. And so out of that friendship and that being in sync on stuff, we realized we like teaching together. We would be at conferences or something. We'd like teaching together, or I'd go assist Craig at ECQC or something like that. And we go, man, this is fun. And then it was like, let's keep doing it. That was it. That's the genesis of the collective. And we literally didn't call ourselves anything. It was just the guys, it was just us. But everyone's like, your group, you people. And we're like, we used to call ourselves the cartel. That's what we used to call ourselves. But then Craig, because he's smart about this kind of stuff, goes, that probably doesn't sound good if it's public.
Yeah.
So it became the Shivworks Collect. Shivworks because Craig was the driver on it, right? He was the one who was like, we were all kind of quiet. The rest of us, the other 5 of us, were kind of quiet. I was teaching and stuff, but I'm not super public. Where Craig was out there, taking the bulk of the slings and arrows. So he established Shivworks. So we're just like, we're the Shivworks Collective. And that's literally how it is. And over the years, we've just become closer and, tighter and that kind of stuff. No big plan, but we love working together because, again, that's my, this stuff is so hard. As you talk about you and Mike trying to work on this and that, it's hard.
Yeah.
No one guy can do this. I don't care who you are. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how much you train. No one guy can figure this out. So for us, it's very much a collective body of wisdom. I'll work on a problem. Hey, guys, I think this might work. And then I talk to the rest and they go, no, we looked at that 6 months ago and that's not true. Okay.
I think what you're talking about, Cecil, reminds me of, in science, this idea of peer reviewed, right?
Yeah.
You have a group of peers that are as adept in this knowledge, perhaps as anyone on the planet. And they look at these protocols that you guys kind of independently maybe come up with some things and go, guys, test this out. They play with it. It doesn't work. And here's why. You can't go plata when you're drawing the gun or whatever. It's just, the guy's going to foul your draw, whatever. The other thing I want to talk that you mentioned briefly and kind of passed by, but I think for the 30-something folks that are watching this morning, and of course everybody in the replay, I think it's important to just pause for a moment. You mentioned how, you try to have this conversation on the gun side of the house, nobody's biting. You try to have the conversation on the jiu-jitsu or the grappling side of the house, nobody's biting on it. Because if you think about it, think about how siloed the shooting community is, right? You've got skeet shooters and they don't necessarily get along with trap shooters. And you got tactical shooters that don't necessarily get along with the hunters, and the hunters don't get along with the firearms collectors who don't shoot their guns. Everybody's in a silo. And then we all know how, those of us that are in the martial arts know how fragmented and weird that martial arts community is. So it's no wonder to me that you were banging your head 20 years ago going, guys, we got a problem. We can solve it if we come together. And everybody's like, hey, screw you, pal.
Yep. Exactly. Silo, that's a really good way of putting it, because it is hard and fast walls.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah. Thank you to the 39 folks that are joining us. Please hit that share button, because we are just getting started with Cecil Burch of Immediate Action Combatives. Thank you to everybody that's joined us live. One of the things Brett said, force on force is a great test, but you think is going to work. And that's why I say that, not that I'm going to say it again, and I know that you're going to disagree, but I think you guys have kind of solved the problem as much as anybody can right now. And the reason I want to bang that.
Rich froze, not me.
And I think so.
Say that again, Rich. You froze just for a second. Doing it again. All right, so I'll keep talking. So it's my show now for a couple seconds.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Okay.
So I was running the show for a couple seconds, just so you know.
I appreciate it. But did you catch what I was saying, man?
You're talking about force on force, and it started froze right as you were talking about that.
What I said was, and sorry about the Wi-Fi, man. I live in the county. We're in the middle of nowhere. What I was saying, Cecil, was, I know you may disagree with this, but I'm going to say, for where we're at right now in this time and space, I think you guys have solved this gun grappling problem as much as you probably can be for now, because we would have seen something come out in ECQC. If there was something there, some student would have pulled it off, and you guys would have went, holy crap. And I know it probably does happen from time to time. You tweak something that somebody came in with, but anyway, yeah, I just, if you're watching this morning and you're not familiar with ECQC, Cecil, can you give us a little rundown on what that's all about?
Yeah, that's Craig's flagship course. It's kind of where he started. It was Extreme Close Quarters Concepts. That was where he was talking about this online and trying to tell people about this intersection between grappling and shooting. At that, that very, he refers to it as 0 to 5 feet. Myself personally, I say 0 to 3 yards, because within that double arms reach, a human being can lunge their height, in the blink of an eye. You just step forward. You don't need any preparatory motion. You can lunge. So you're talking about, people can cover 5 to 6 feet literally like that. So that's where I think the entanglement problem really is at its worst. But so Craig started doing ECQC, and it was that idea of, it was gunfighting at 0 to 5 feet. And then from there, what happens? And so when you actually, so people throw around the term pressure test, but too much force on force is a preset scripted thing. It's like, this is how it's going to be. Well, that's not real life. So that's not, for true force on force, true pressure testing. So you need to have the guy, he's got to resist. He's got to physically resist. Cool. But beyond that, he's got to have a opposing will. He has to be saying, I want to win. I want you to lose. Or actually, the opposing will is, I want to win. I'm going to do something to stop you. He has to have, we refer to it as malevolent intent. And that sounds worse than it is. But it's just basically, he wants you to lose.
Yep.
Right? It's important for him to win and you to lose. And then he's got to have freedom of action. You can't say, grab my wrist, no, the other wrist. You know what I mean? That's not pressure testing. No matter how hard that guy resists, it's not pressure testing, because you've told him what to do, right? So he's got to have that freedom of action. So where Craig started, where ECQC started, was exactly that. You put these guys together. Here's the problem. All right. You are within 5 feet of this guy. You both have Sims guns. You got safety gear on, like fist helmets and stuff like that. Go. And out of that, and it was very much a laboratory in the beginning. I mean, it still is, but we kind of know what, again, like I said, we know what the best practices are. But in the early 2000s, we didn't really know. It literally was a laboratory. And we're like, here's the thing that people don't know. Craig hated Brazilian Jiu-jitsu when he started. He was very much a Filipino martial artist type guy, super deep background in classical Japanese martial arts. Hated, like most traditional martial arts, he hated Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, hated wrestling. He didn't say, hey, you know what? This is what people think. He wasn't a Brazilian Jiu-jitsu wrestler guy who said, I'm going to crowbar this crap into the problem. He was, I hate this stuff. But what he saw in that laboratory was the guys who won, the guys who dominated the fight over and over and over again, had some kind of grappling. Even if it was just that tiny little bit. You know, they were in the army and they had, you know, level 1 or level 2 army combatives. They were kicking the crap out of that classic martial artist or that IPSC shooter. They were beating the snot out of that guy. And Craig's like, oh, huh. I probably need to look at this. You know, none of this was, you know, hey, we're gonna force what we like onto the problem. It was, this is what's. I got a DVD from like 2000, and it's a guy teaching World War II combatives in a seminar format. And I got it I was trading some material with another guy, and I got this, and I was looking at it. And I'm like, I know half the people in this seminar. There's students of mine and stuff, and there's Craig in there learning this because he thought that was the answer in 2000. You know, that classic World War II combatives type material, because he wanted that to work because it made sense. It's easier to do. God knows it's easier to teach. That stuff's a hell of a lot easier to teach than grappling, as you know.
Yeah.
But you found pretty quickly in this lab that everything works, right? I don't like saying it doesn't work, but what works over and over and over again for most people in most situations, that's not it. And so ECQC became this laboratory of like, here. And then so the rest of us, like Paul was already doing some of that stuff anyway on his own. He just wasn't public about it. He was mostly working in law enforcement for that kind of stuff. And then I was doing the same thing in my training group. It was like, hey, here's a knife, here's a gun, let's go. I already had the jiu-jitsu background, so we were already more grappling centric anyway. And that's how we started, just how we coalesced. Because Craig goes, hey, I think it was a brown belt when I first started talking to, I was a brown belt when I first talking to Craig. And so he's like, hey, Cecil, what do you think about this? You know, and that's just where all this stuff kind of came out, was literally that pressure testing environment, you know. And then, like you said, it goes through peer review. Hey, what do you think? Well, this is what I saw with my students last week. Yep. You know, and it's like, you know, so we kind of come up with, again, well, this makes more sense. Let's go this way. You know, striking. We were all strikers. All of us. Every one of our background was heavy, deep striking. Right? None of us started off as heavy grapplers. None of us. We were all strikers. Almost none of us teach striking to really any great extent anymore. It's not to say it's not important. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it's a little easier to train. It's a little bit more available, and it's not nearly as useful in a weapons-based environment. Grappling and the tools take precedent over striking most of the time. So it's not to say don't do it, but you know what's not taught is stand-up grappling in a weapons environment, grounded grappling in a weapons-based environment. That's not taught or understood. So that's where we focus our time, you know, not striking. And that's an evolution.
It is. And you know, for people of a certain age, you know, I'm 51, you're in your mid 50s. Yeah. For us, that is, you know, you mentioned we were all strikers, but I think that just is a product of our generation. The guys, the guys coming into martial arts now, they're skipping all that really and going straight into getting on the ground and stuff like that.
Or they're going straight into like Thai boxing or something like that, or a good MMA program that has the really good boxing from the beginning.
Absolutely. I want to get to some of the questions because I've got a bunch of questions for you, Cecil, and looks like our audience does too.
Cool.
Let's see. Tiny says, does Cecil find that there is a best location for a concealed firearm when things go hands-on? What are your recommendations?
No, I'm really agnostic about that kind of stuff because I think it's skill set. It depends on, I think it depends on your own personal skill set. It depends on your own personal situation. Like if you are, it's cool. I carry appendix because I find it easier for me, and I find it easier for me in most situations. But some people aren't going to be comfortable with appendix no matter what you do. And that's cool. And you can't force it. Some people, because of their job, for instance, have to carry, on the hip or behind it. I remember having this discussion in 2005 with Mike Brown, right? He loved appendix, but he goes, on duty, I'm in my duty rig. And he didn't want to go from, on duty, shooting, carrying at 3:00 and then carrying an appendix, even though he loved appendix carry. I'm like, that makes sense. It has to fit. So whatever works best for you, then just practice it. I don't think there's any real shortcut. I don't think there's any true shortcut to this. It's all right. I'm going to, for whatever reason, I'm going to carry FBI style. Cool. All right. Get some partners, tell them, hey, let's go at this, with safety gear, but then, work on that skill set to go, okay, this is what I need to do consistently to get that knife out, get that gun out, get that sap out, get that OC spray out, whatever it is. So I'm pretty agnostic on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, good answer. I think the first, you mentioned Mike Brown. That's probably where the first taste I got of the ShivWorks Collective course material was from Mike, probably, 6 or 7 years ago. And was like, holy cow, they're on something. Mike's a great dude. I'll have to get him on here one morning.
You should make him get up early. Of course, it won't be as early for him.
Yeah, no, he's an up early kind of guy, I think.
Yep.
Mark says one of the reasons that armed inert grappling in the octagon is great training. I guess he was referring to something you said. Alan asks, don't you think in today's time that there are times having more tools, like some form of martial arts, could keep a person from using unnecessary deadly force with a firearm?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge believer in that kind of stuff. I look at it as a continuum, right? So we go from the pre-fight threat containment, understanding how violent criminal actors think and act, and how we get ourselves deselected. And then, Craig's terminology of managing unknown contacts, having the understanding and the egolessness. See, I just created a word. Look at that. I just created a whole word on your podcast.
Love it.
But, the ability to just walk away because you know what, this is not worth my time. I'm not going to get into some confrontation, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to get out of here. Going from that, then up to an empty hand response. And, you have the empty hand response up from, hey, I'm just going to control the guy. I'm just going to stop the thing, all the way on up to doing major damage to somebody. OC spray, small impact weapons, edge weapons, and firearms. And having that continuum and understanding it and having access to all of them as often as you possibly can. We can't always go armed fully like that, but if we sort of have that mindset, and then I find, but for myself, especially, that's one of the things I loved about martial arts, especially jiu-jitsu, right? I fight guys 3, 4, 5 times a week, all the time. I'm not worried in the sense of like, Larry Lindemann and I had this conversation years ago. We both had a deep background in Jeet Kune Do. And it was real interesting. One of the reasons we bonded so early was because we had almost the identical background. So he trained directly with Dan Inosanto, and I trained with what at the time was Inosanto's #1 student, Paul Vunek. But we were doing the same exact thing, same time frame. Literally. I did an Inosanto seminar in '89 that Larry was actually the assistant at, and we didn't even know it until like 10 years later. You were like, you were at that seminar in Janesville, get the hell out of here kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But we had this conversation like, he said, Cecil, we did all this stuff for 20 years and we were doing all this stuff, but we knew in the back of our heads, we were unsure, right? Because it's a lot of drilling and it's pad work and it's hitting the heavy bag and it's doing stick patterns and stuff. He goes, but once you start doing boxing savate, Thai boxing, once you start doing judo, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, you are doing this. So you know in your heart of hearts, in your soul, if you're going to be able to handle this guy or not. So when you do, you're like, I'm not going to overreact. I don't need to worry. I'm not scared and jumping to the gun because the guy said, hey, screw you. Boom, burn the guy down. You know, which you see in these EVOs all the time. You see that happen. I do a class called Close Contact Handgun. It's one of my live fire classes. And it's mostly how not to get entangled. Actually, it's not mostly. It is. It's how not to get entangled. It's how to shoot at close quarters. It's how to shoot from attention or from a press ready. And then it's a lot of muck. And we spend a day and a half just doing that. And we go to UTM EVOs at the end. And I always tell people, hey, you're going to see somebody murder somebody else in these EVOs. And it always happens. And students always come up to me, how did you know he was going to do that? Because I see it every single time. Somebody gets scared. Somebody's worried about their responses, and they get the gun out too fast and murder a guy.
Yeah.
So when you know that you can handle this situation without lethal force, that you don't need to go there. Hey, I'm going to give him a quick spray, OC spray, and then I'm going to get out of here. Or, I'm going to whack him upside the jaw with the flat of my sap. Or I'm going to, put him in a rear naked choke and, just do that. That, man, going to lethal force as the jump almost never happens. It's very much, oh, you know what? Okay, yes, this is lethal force. You recognize it better.
Yeah.
Because you recognize what is not justifying of lethal force. And so when you see it, when you go, oh no, I need to go to the gun right now to solve this, but that's the only thing that's going to solve my problem. It's a little bit easier. And I think more legally justifiable.
Yeah.
I have to tell the judge, hey, I did this, this, and this. And I recognize through 41 years of training that this guy was not just wolfing at me. I've had that situation. And here's what was going to happen. And I can show you training footage of where the same thing happens to people over and over again. And I had to burn this guy down.
Yeah.
Of course, I wouldn't say burn him down in court.
Probably not a good idea.
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
Hey, Cecil, I wanted to talk to something that you mentioned a moment ago. You said something about in relation to you find out what works and don't work, and back before 1994, the UFC, we had moved around a lot as a kid. My brother's on this morning, he can attest, so it's a judo in one town, taekwondo in another, Shotokan in another town that we lived in. So, I was always like, what is the best? Everywhere I go, my sensei says, this is the cat's meow.
Yep.
And then we start learning, and then we see where we're at now with a grappling integrated environment. But your point about Craig had attended the seminar with World War II fighting. I remember when I became a Marine Corps close combat instructor, Gunny Don Vito was the guy who created not the modern Marine Corps martial arts program, but the one prior to that, which was something called line training. Yeah, if you're familiar with that. And I remember one of the seminars for the instructors, they said, this is the crap they were teaching to This is the crap they were teaching to folks back then. And it's like you punch them in the solar plexus and you grab their rib cage and you rip it forward like that. And it puts pressure and does all this, breaks clavicles and all this bullshit.
Yep.
And it's like and then you go, well, let me test it. Oh, we can't test it because it's so lethal and we're just never going to know, but you're going to have to push the I believe button and use this technique. Right. And thank God we're far beyond that now.
Yep. I call that faith-based self-defense. And I don't, it's perfectly fine as your religion, to, have a religion based on faith. It's totally cool. Right. I think a self-defense plan based on faith is kind of stupid. I want to know. That's why I gravitated towards the combat sports, because I know this stuff works. Okay. Yes. Did these World War II combatives, were they used to kill Nazi sentries in World War II? Cool. Yeah, probably. Doesn't help me because I can't actually practice gouging the guy's neck, throat punching the guy, breaking his neck by twisting his skull or whatever. Oh, this Indonesian martial art was used to repel pirates in our village 300 years ago. Bitchin'. I don't know that because I can't do any of that kind of stuff. If I do this slash, it cuts his calf here and then he falls. Cool. I don't know that, especially because I'm not carrying a machete around with me. I got a 3-inch bladed knife, either a folder or fixed blade. And I was that way too, right? It took me a while because I'm not particularly a smart man, right? I'm kind of thick-headed. So I'm doing all the martial arts. So I started heavy savate in 87, 88, and everything was sparring, or not sparring, but everything was with a partner. We rarely hit pads. It was always contact with somebody else. I was boxing late 80s, did jiu-jitsu in 89. And it took me a good 5 or 6 years. It was mid 90s before it really hit me. Why does boxing and savate and wrestling and judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, why do they look similar? Why do all of them have similar, fundamental characteristics? And none of it looks like any of the martial arts I'm training. Why is that? And I was like, I don't know, I'm stupid. So I just kept training it all, right? But eventually I started trying to do all that martial art stuff, the Filipino stuff, the Indonesian stuff, the Chinese systems. I tried to do all of that in that boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu paradigm. And you know what I found? Doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And what happens, and if you see any of these martial artists, these guys this guy's a Bagua guy. This one's a Mystica Kwatong specialist, right? And you see him do MMA. What does it always look like? Bad kickboxing, right?
Yeah,
always. Yeah. It's like, all right, if that's what real fighting looks like, why do all the other stuff and then do poorly? Why don't you go to where we're already working this, where they've already had hundreds, if not thousands of years to hone how this stuff actually works? And you don't have to take it on faith.
Yep.
I punch a guy, I know what it feels like. I get punched, I know what it feels like. I don't have to do the 5-finger heart exploding punch, death punch technique, hoping that that's going to save me, when my life's on the line or my loved ones' lives are on the line, right? I know when I rear naked choke this guy, he's going out 3 to 5 seconds. He's done. I know that because I've done it for 30 years.
Yeah. Speaking of that, my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, Cody Hudson, is on this.
Cody, nice.
He says,
Mr. Wristlocker. He's an evil, evil man who should be banned from jiu-jitsu.
Well, I guess that answers his question on that.
What did he say?
He says, what's Cecil's outlook on wrist locker?
He knows what my outlook is. No, everything's good.
Yeah.
Everything's good. The only thing, the wrist lockers in jiu-jitsu and leg lockers are the same way, is they tend to get really focused on that and they're trying to do it every single time.
Yeah.
Which is my only problem, especially leg locks, before the Danaher Death Squad started kind of really honing it into a jiu-jitsu format. Mm-hmm. Guys do leg locks. It was almost like, that's all I'm going to do. I can't pass your guard. I can't submit you. I can't escape from the bottom. So I'm just going to leg lock. Wrist locks used to be that way as well. Right? Oh, well, I can't do anything. I've got you in my guard. I can't arm bar you. I can't choke you. I can't sweep you. I can't take you back. Oh, I'm going to try to wrist lock you. Mm-hmm. So it was just that little old school jiu-jitsu irritation in the back of my head. And Cody goes, hey, Cecil, I do wrist locks. I'm like, oh, you're one of those. but Cody actually has a really good methodology for it, which I know you're aware of.
Oh yeah.
He's not just trying to wrist lock because his game sucks. Mm. What he's done is he's built a top-notch, legitimate jiu-jitsu game. And then he goes, hey, I've got such good control of this guy. You know what I'm going to do? I can finish him this way. I can finish him with the wrist lock. I can finish him with here, which is how it should be. Yeah. But that old school guy in me still comes out and goes,
Phil Wong has a question, Cecil. He says, what about the guy who says, quote, I'm too old for martial arts, too fat to run, etc. How do you suggest they gain enough confidence to avoid overreacting under pressure in a simulated deadly force situation?
See, so I think we as instructors, we do a really crappy job of teaching and talking sometimes is we make things really black and white, right? There's no grays. Things are very much, this is how it is. It's very dogmatic. And I think we forget the grays, right? And so sometimes, don't go to the ground in a street fight, you'll get killed. No, you know what? That's empirically, I can prove that wrong.
All right.
Always carry a gun or you're going to get killed in the street. No, I can prove that that's wrong. Is it a good idea to carry a gun as often as you possibly can? Absolutely. Because you never know when you need it, like a seatbelt, right? Or a fire extinguisher. You don't know when you need it. So yeah, carry it. But if you can't, you're on an airplane or you're traveling overseas, you're not going to carry a gun. You're not getting killed, right? So we can't say it in this black and white manner because then people in the real world go, I can't do that. I can't live up to your standards because of my job. I work in an MPE and I've spent, 20 years in this profession. I'm not going to just quit my job and be a barista at Starbucks because you said I got to carry a gun or, whatever. I think as instructors, we have to be very careful about not getting that thing across. And one of the issues that guys like me and Craig and Paul and Larry have had and Chris Pry have had over the years is, trying to get people to understand, hey, there's this integrated thing. You need to do grappling. You need to do jiu-jitsu. You need to the striking. You need other stuff. Is sometimes it comes across as like we're trying to get you to be, this weird combination of a UFC champion and an Olympic gold medalist lifter and tier 1 spec ops operators. Like, no. Yeah, that's maybe our standard. That's our where we would like to get to that level. But the realistic thing is all we're trying to be is better than we were, safer than we were, more dangerous than we were yesterday, right? That might only be 1%, 3%, 5%, but it's still more. So when people, I get that all the time. I get that question all the time. I'll see, so I'd love to do jiu-jitsu, but I'm this, or I have this injury or whatever. Cool. I'm not trying to make black belt world champions. That's not my focus. I'm trying to make you as good as you possibly can be with the limitations that you have. All right. So you're a 65-year-old person with, a hip replacement. All right. You're not going to be able to move the way Bachesha moves. You're not going to be able to move the way Samuel Braga moves. Right.
Yeah.
But I can still make you more dangerous and safer and more capable than if you didn't do jiu-jitsu, right? Anybody can do this stuff. You just have to take those steps, and I don't want to sell it as you have to do jiu-jitsu. I think you do. I don't want to sell it that way, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like I think you need to learn how to shoot the gun right with somebody good. You have to take a class with a Seekland or a Tom Gibbons or somebody like that. But any of us should be like, what can I do to be better? What can I do to make myself that much more dangerous? And I don't really care. Go to the one thing that I think jiu-jitsu has managed to retain over every other system is that inclusiveness. Right. There's probably a few gyms out there across the world that's full of, 21-year-old roided up meatheads. Sure. That's probably true. There's some of those, but that is literally the black swan, the outliers. 99% of them are like, we've got kids, we've got women, we've got old people, we've got people who, I have a buddy of mine. He's a purple belt. He's paralyzed from the waist down. He was a blue belt before he was paralyzed. He got his purple belt after he was paralyzed. He has a very specific game. He can't play guard, but
No.
he's built a game around that. And is he going to beat Buchecha or Leandro Lowe in the finals of the Mundials? No. But you know what he can beat? That street thug who doesn't know what he's about.
Yeah.
You know? And so everybody, you can get a little bit better. Okay. Don't devote your life to jiu-jitsu. You can only go once a week. Go once a week for a year. You know? You're going to be that much better, and you're going to have that much more understanding of, hey, here's what I need to do. Here's where it gets dangerous. Here's where the gun comes into play. And most importantly, your emotional outlook is going to be much better, because you're going to be like, oh, I can deal with this horrible situation, because last week I had that 300-pound guy crushing my head into the mat, and I survived that.
You know, Cecil, you mentioned a couple of times, you know, the concept of being dangerous. And I want to, there's a Jordan Peterson quote that I pulled up here because I think it plays into what you've said, and something I really like. It says, quote, "A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very, very dangerous man who has it under voluntary control," end quote. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. I'm absolutely a believer in that kind of thing. The person who I respect is that guy. Larry Lindemann is a good example. He helped write the manual for the Illinois State Police Defensive Tactics, one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the world. He wrote the Defensive Tactics manual. He was on the SWAT team in the 90s and early 2000s when they were one of the top 3 most active PACE units in the world. Delta and Dev Group both sent units to work with the ISP SWAT team, right? Larry's seen some stuff and done some stuff. He is, you meet him, he's one of the nicest, just coolest guys you hang out with. Why? Because he chooses to be a good man and to not be violent. And when he uses violence, it's in the service of good. You know, I think that's much more admirable than somebody who's I had a political science professor my first year at college, because I was a political science major. And after this class, I got the hell out. Because this professor, who was the dean of the political science college at Arizona State University, said in class, and like in front of 100 people, you know, violence is never good. Whoever uses violence is a bad thing. And I said to him, this is in class, I said, so if a bad guy is, you know, raping your wife and threatening to kill your kids, you're not going to do anything? No, because then I would be a bad person. So you're going to let your wife be raped and your kids killed? Yes. I'm like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
You know, he's not a good man. He thinks he is, but he's not. He's a coward, you know, and he's going to let the bad people run rampant. That's not a good man. I'm sorry. That's not a good man. That's not a good man.
Seiglander and I talked about this on the podcast recently when Biden was asked to deny, and I'm not making this political. It just happens to fit neatly into what you're saying, Cecil. But he says, you know, they asked Vice President Biden, will you denounce Antifa and BLM and all the violence that they've been doing in these cities around the country? He goes, I denounce violence in all of its forms, every single one of its forms. And I'm like, brother, you're missing the boat. There is a time when violence is, you know, again, violence is rarely the answer, but when it is the only answer.
Yeah. Give me another answer to Hitler.
Exactly. There's,
you know, you're not going to talk him down. You're not going to do, you know, sanctions on his country, and Nazi Germany after 10 years would give up. You know, it didn't work on Castro in Cuba, so it's certainly not going to work in, you know, a powerhouse like Nazi Germany in 1939. You know, the thing that worked, or Japan. You know,
yeah.
Hirohito's Japan. Sorry, the only thing that worked was overwhelming, massive violence to stop their evil violence. Sorry, you know, you don't understand that. You know, we can't even. That's not even a conversation I can have.
I can't have it.
Yeah, it's just you know, you're telling me the Earth is flat. You know, we're in the space station orbiting the Earth, and you're telling me the Earth is flat. I'm like, sorry, we're not going to have that conversation.
I 100% agree with you.
No.
And see, so you told me I could have an hour of your time, so we're coming up toward the
I'm
end.
good. I'm good. Let's go. I'm having fun. You know,
Okay,
whatever.
Great.
If I'm late for work and clients are screaming at me, I was like, what? All right,
Okay.
it's Friday. It's the holidays.
That's right. Okay, good. Wonderful. That's great news. Let's see. One of the things that somebody put in the comments a moment ago about Andrew Branca is, and I love what Andrew has done with law self-defense, because it puts the contextual veneer to what you and I have been doing our entire adult lives, you know. And I think without that, Rory Miller says it best. He goes, if you don't put it into the context of the legal use of force, all you're really doing as a martial artist or as a shooter is training yourself to go to prison. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, you know, and it's funny, you know, who's worse than gun guys about understanding legality is martial artists. Yeah. They're awful. At least, you know, guys like Masada Ayub and Andrew Branca and stuff, they've been trying to get that. I mean, you know, hell, Massad's been doing this since what? 1979, 78,
oh, yeah.
Trying to get the idea across that, hey, you know, you have to think about this kind of stuff. So some gun guys are at least listening to that. Martial artists don't at all. I had a guy who actually I trained with my JKD instructor. He's a great guy, great martial artist, but he doesn't carry a gun. He doesn't, because he's telling another former student of mine, he goes, no, I don't carry a gun because, you know, you use a gun, you run into all kind of legal problems. This is the same guy who teaches the students to stab people.
Yep.
To headbutt them, to elbow them in the face multiple times, to twist their head down into a rising knee strike. And he thinks that's perfectly, you know, his view is that's completely different than if I pull a gun and, you know, dump 3 rounds into a high thoracic, you know. And it's like, no, I would argue that he's setting himself up for maybe worse stuff, because he's out there teaching this material. That prosecuting attorney says, oh, do you teach this kind of thing? And shows the jury you going, doing stuff like that. Yeah. That's not going to go well. You know, martial art, yeah, we have to understand. And that was one of the drivers of the collective in the early days. It's like, we never just talked about like, when was the physically opportune moment to get a gun out in this entanglement and shoot them, but also, is it legal to do it in that moment? Could we justify going to that knife, going to that gun while the guy's inside our guard, or while we're inside the other guy's guard, or, you know, the guy's on top of it, whatever? Can we do it legally too? You have to think about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because of course I have Cody, who's my primary coach, but then I also train at another gym, which is a 10th Planet, which is good stuff. I love the going from no gi to gi and back and forth. I think it's good. But that coach, and I love him to death, man, but he's, you know, has no background at all. He puts it, none of his techniques are in the context of the legal use of force. And sometimes I just bite my tongue and shake my head and do the technique and quietly go, well, you cannot do that one legally, because the person's on their back raising their hands and help me, and I'm coming in and snapping their legs. But it's like, what are we doing?
Yep, exactly. Just it doesn't. There's some. I think there's a one of the reasons that I had such a problem in the early days trying to get, you know, those silos, right? The shooting silo and the martial arts silos through, was martial artists. The reason a lot of guys tend to martial arts is because they have some anti-gun thoughts somewhere in their head. Mm-hmm. Either they weren't ever raised around it, or they have an unreasonable fear of it, or whatever. And so, just like most people who are pro gun control, they don't think about this stuff, right? It's bad. And that's different. And that's legally different. No, I'm just hands-on with this guy. No, it's the same damn thing, guys. You have the same rules. Tools don't make a difference. It's how you're using them in the appropriate context.
Well, and I remember thinking some of this as I was doing some executive protection work in across Europe and the Middle East as a young Marine. But then I never played with any of it. And then as a police officer, I remember there was an instructor that said, and this is a great truism for anybody that is a law enforcement officer or a concealed carry guy or gal. He said, What percentage of the time are you as a law enforcement officer going to be on a call where there's a firearm involved? And, the class says 5%, 10%, 1%. And he's like 100% of the time,
100%.
you brought the gun there.
Yep.
And one of the famous things that you say, Cecil, that I'm trying to steal is it doesn't matter who brought the gun to the fight. It's who controls the gun. So
who controls the position owns
yes,
the gun.
Right. Exactly. So with that being said, it's like if you're carrying a gun and you're not thinking about the things that Cecil Burch is doing, I think you're wrong. And because I carry this gun here, so I've got this magic talisman that's going to save me. Far from it, brother. You may have just given me the gun if I'm fighting you.
Yep. And, and again, this comes back to that laboratory, Craig, lab in Craig's classes or my classes or Paul's classes. We see it over and over again. We tell people that. Don't go to the gun too early. It is not a magic talisman. Do not go to this gun too early. Blah, blah, blah. And what happens? People go to the gun.
Yep.
People get the gun out, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, the other guy has taken my gun. Yeah. And he gets to use it. There's a famous picture of one of my students who's now a purple belt under me. One of his first ECQCs he took. It's a picture floats around on the internet. It comes up every now and then. It's he was going up against this guy who was, so Brad, my student's 6 foot, 210 when he's in, when he's not in too much beer drinking shape. Going up against this guy who was 6'4", like 250 plus, and it was like who's got that farmer strength hands. He could palm a basketball. This guy was just huge, right? Mm-hmm. So Craig, because Craig's evil, goes, Brad, go, you're going to do the evil with him. So, but you see, the picture is Brad has mounted this guy. He started on the bottom, but the picture is him. He's on top in mount. Brad's lefty. So he's got his gun up in his 2. He's got the other guy's gun up in the 2, and both sim guns are pointing down at the guy's head.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And it's like, yeah, that's Brad, and that's the truth of the matter. That's the truth of the matter. Brad was the better grappler. Brad understood the problem, took control, was able to get his gun out when he wanted to, and the guy couldn't do anything about it, and got the other guy's gun, and the guy couldn't do anything about it. That's the reality. If you don't understand this problem, you don't own the gun. I don't care. It can be your cool, your $4,000 smithed up 9x23 1911 and all of your cool guy stuff, and you just done a class with Rob Latham and Mike Seeklander, and you're a badass shooter and all that kind of stuff. That guy's within double arm's reach of you, and you don't understand the problem. He owns that gun. You just given him that gun.
Yeah, and to your point, and they both had malevolent intent from the get-go.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your intent was if you don't have the ability to get position and take possession.
That's one of my pet peeves. Yeah, what you said, because you hear that. Well, when it goes for real, I'll do whatever it takes. Number one, how do you know? Because you never put yourself in there, and generally what we find is that person is the first one to tap out. They're the first ones to go, I can't breathe, stop. That's number one. But number two is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Go ahead. Do that kind of stuff. In the early days of jiu-jitsu, this almost never happens anymore. But in the early days, we had a lot of guys come in to challenge us. Yeah. My coach's old academy was in not a great part of Phoenix. His original one was not in a great part of Phoenix, and it was on a major street. And we had guys come in literally on a weekly basis, coming in, street fighters, drunks, gangbangers, other martial arts. We had guys regularly come and go, I think this stuff's crap. And Meg would just point at one of us and go get him. Mm-hmm. And it literally was no rules. That's why I always laugh. Oh, you guys, you sport guys, you're not used to this. Oh, okay, yeah, sure, keep thinking that. Meanwhile, I've got years and got decades of experience of street fighting these guys who I didn't know if they had weapons or not. They were trying to gouge my eyes. They were trying to fish hook me. They were trying to do all that kind of stuff. And we still choked them out. We still broke the arms. We still did all that kind of stuff. you can have the, what's the term, everybody? Violence of action. Oh, violence of action will help you. Yeah, if that is turbocharging a skill set.
That's right.
Violence of action without the skill set is just
flailing around.
Yeah, exactly. It's flailing around. Exactly.
Yeah. Let's get to some of the comments here. Cecil says, Chris Heiss says, great information here. Thank you, gentlemen. My brother Jeffrey says, Virginia is trying to make martial arts illegal and go after instructors. Yeah, I saw that, Jeff. That is crazy. Yeah. Tiny says, my internet is worse than Rich's this morning, missing half the commentary. Sorry about that. I feel your pain, I tell you. Jera says, my grandpa said, don't pull a gun unless you intend to use it. Probably good advice. Mark says, wow, both well said. Never thought about the gun that way. Wow. Thank you, sir. Thank you to the 39 folks that are watching live this morning, and everyone that will watch in the replay in the days and weeks to come. I want to get to William April. We've touched on him briefly. William, of course, passed this year and has created an unimaginable void in our community. Can you talk to William and his legacy and stuff like that, Cecil?
Yeah. Again, one of my closest friends. Such an amazing amount of information to give to the community. You know, he was an academic. You know, he had deep learning. Spent decades actually dealing with this, you know, as a mental health therapist, actually dealing with people and talking to, you know, he worked with the Louisiana state penal system at times, you know, dealing with criminals and, you know, getting idea, you know, he was one of the guys, sometimes they call in to decide if the guy was too crazy to stand trial type stuff. So he interviewed serial killers and all this kind of stuff. He had that, but he was also, before that, his first life after college was as a street cop in New Orleans. You know, he worked in the jail system and then he worked in the streets. So he had this amazing two different areas that he completely integrated. And then on top of that, he was just an amazing communicator. People would listen to his lectures and just, you could see the crowd just literally like in trance, like they could not pay attention to when he's talking. And the information he got was so important to what we're doing, how violent criminal actors think, how they act, how they look at victims, how they decide on victims, all that kind of stuff. Such crucial information that if somebody talked about it before, it was very much in passing. It was very much like, you know, whatever. Look, what's the saying?
Keep your head on a swivel. Or
keep your head on a swivel. On don't be prey, be a predator. You know, simplistic. You know, things like that. He actually would like, well, this is what that means, right? This is how you do that kind of thing. It's just a great, you know, communicator. It was such a good guy. You know, I knew what he did for people behind the scenes because I saw it and I was, you know, he helped me. Mm-hmm. But after he passed, I didn't realize, I mean, this outpouring of people were like, yeah, he would send me texts every week, you know, checking on me because I had talked to him one time after one seminar, and 3 years later, he was still checking on this guy and giving this guy help.
Yeah.
You know, that's William. So, and you know, there's, you know, some people are trying to kind of swim in the same waters that William did, but the problem is they're very one-dimensional, right? They're coming at it from one perspective. You know, they're coming from a street perspective, which is valuable. I'm not saying it's not. Or they're coming at it from an academic perspective, which is valuable. Mm-hmm. But his was where those things meet and how it actually helps people. How his stuff, he had an actionable plan with the information. He wasn't just lecturing, you know, hey, this study says this. Okay, well, how does that help me tomorrow? And he was like, it helps you like this, you know. So, like you said, it's a void, and I don't. At least for the foreseeable future, it's not going to be filled.
Yeah, and for those of you watching this morning, if you want to, we had William April was probably one of our first 50 guests on the show. Please, I encourage you to go back and listen to that, or just Google William April, find some of the other podcasts he's been on, learn from him, because again, it's one of those elements of the contextual understanding of the fight, from understanding how a violent criminal actor thinks, understanding how you can be deselected. With the things that he wrote and talked about in that regard, I think there's just nobody out there, because to your point, Cecil, he bridged the gap between knowing what it was like working the jails of New Orleans, working the streets of New Orleans, understanding as an academic what that means. And, I remember when I was choosing a major in school, I wanted to understand the human animal. So, I got a degree in social psychology just to kind of like.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
My degree's in psychology.
Oh, well, look, great minds think alike.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I didn't give a crap. I was an adult learner, and somewhat of an autodidactic person. Yeah. And I'm like, I really don't need a degree, but you know what? I want to study why these little hairless bipedal primates do the crazy crap that I've seen them do.
Yeah.
From my own background as a bouncer and working in corrections and working as a street cop and 20 something years in the Marine Corps. I just see them do crazy stuff that defies logic,
Yep. And, and William was, one of the things I love that William talked about, he goes, they're human. They're people. Yes. They just don't think like us. Their experiences molded them to think differently. And if you call them something else, they're goblins, they're monsters or what, it doesn't help you.
That's right.
Because you put them in that category. Like, well, that doesn't help you. You need to understand they're human. They're people. Here's why this guy is willing to go up to you, never seen you before, and shoot you in the face because he decided he needed your phone. You better understand that, or you're not going to be able to be prepared for it. I don't care how much violence of action. I don't care how much you have your head on a swivel. If you don't understand that guy might literally just walk up to you and shoot you in the face, you're not going to be ready for that. No. I don't care how badass you are. You're not going to be ready for that. And he was awesome at getting that idea across to people.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions here. Durham Snyder says, was there a go-to technique when you were fighting challengers?
No, I probably did a lot of Americanas and Kimuras, but that was more a reflection of my personal performance as opposed to something that worked better than anything else. I'm not a believer in that kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, have your go-to moves, have your things you like, but you've got to be well-rounded enough to deal with whatever, because you don't know. Mm-hmm. You see that all the time. You see, oh, I've got the best guillotine on the planet. I've got a Marcelo Garcia guillotine. Yeah, but if that other guy never feeds his head to you, you're never going to get the guillotine.
That's right.
So you better have, something else. I was like the most judo players' mentality. Like, most judokas only have about 4 throws that they do. Mm-hmm. There's only, they know them all, but they only have 4 that they do. And they're all built around the, okay, I love a Sotogari.
Me too.
And I'm really great about that. But if the guy, stiff arms you or does the thing and you can't do the entry, well, you've got to have that immediate reaction. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's how you have to build everything. Your entire game plan, from all aspects of empty hand to tools and everything else. You've got to be able to, what is he giving me in this moment? What's, and you have to think, what's the most plausible things that are going to work for you? Like me, I'm not particularly flexible. So he might give me a go-go plata. I'm not going to do it. Sorry, ain't happening. You know, he might give me a berimbolo. It's not my thing. I can do it. You know, I can teach it, but it's not my thing that I'm going to be able to do. You know, but you know, you're in my half guard. I'm going to sweep you. I'm going to take your back. That's a given. You know, we have to have those kind of things as opposed to a go-to move. And you have to remember, in the early days, nobody knew. Yeah, they were challenging us, but they didn't know what they were challenging. Right? All they heard was, you know, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is the best, and blah blah blah. It's beating everything else. So it's the guy coming in, blah blah blah. You know, I've never been beaten in a street fight before. Boom, taken to the ground, mount.
Yeah.
You know, smack him on the back of the head a few times. He rolls over and you choke him.
Yep.
You know, that's a very typical thing. So I probably saw that more than anything else.
Yep.
You know, that was probably the most common finish in those kind of things, is the guys, because that's your reaction. Everybody turns fetal, right? If you don't know better, your thing is like, oh, I got to cover up and turn away from that pain, which is, you know, Jiu-Jitsu 101. Right.
Like, I want to get off my back. Okay. You're going to roll face down and I'm going to push this guy. And all you're doing is feeding the neck. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
A couple comments here. Matt says Personal Defense Network. Of course, that's my good friend Rob Pincus's network, has Dr. April's collection of work.
Yep.
Definitely have to check that out.
I collected as much as I possibly could. You helped Rich send me the links for his appearances on American Warrior Society. There's a page, I think if you just Google Personal Defense Network, William April, there's a page and it's literally got everything we can possibly find. All the videos, all his 2 DVDs he did with Personal Defense Network. Rob put them up for free, in total, the complete things. Every podcast we could find, anything we could put on William is pretty much on that page.
Yeah. I'm so glad that Matt said that, because I would have forgotten that. Thanks.
Yeah,
Matt.
I totally forgot about it. I started when I was talking about William. I thought about mentioning that, and then I went off on a tangent like I normally do, and fell out of my brain.
Durham says people are not crazy; they're rational, but their experiences drive what is rational. Survival is rationality, and some don't escape their need to merely survive. Well said. There's a really good book. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago when I had Joe Saunders from the Managing Violence podcast, a really interesting book by, I forget the PhD that wrote it, but it's called Predictably Irrational. And there's ways that you can predict the irrational conduct of others. But I want to get to a point, because, you know, your length of time as a self-defense instructor is probably similar to mine. I mean, I started teaching self-defense related stuff in 93-ish as a Marine instructor at School of Infantry, and then as a law enforcement instructor, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to ask your opinion, man. What do self-defense instructors get wrong?
Oh, we don't have that long a show, dude. You know, again, I think too many self-defense instructors, gun and martial arts side both, talk in these absolute black and whites, and they forget context. Context is the trump card on everything.
Yep.
That SWAT guy's context has nothing to do with the solo street cop. The solo street cop's context has zero to do with me as a private citizen. You know, yes, are there some universals we can take? You know, hey, I'm going to take that pistol class from the guy who was just out of, you know, Delta.
Yeah.
Cool. Because they're going to have some interesting stuff. But I can't take 100% of what he's teaching and plug that into my context.
Yes.
You know, we have to think about this. Well, what works for me? And again, the self-defense, the instructors and the people of authority will say these things of like, well, you know, if you can't carry a gun in your job, quit your job. Screw you.
Yeah.
I went through 4 years of college to get a degree in this profession. And then I've spent 25, 30 years in this profession, and I'm going to leave it because you think I should go work at McDonald's or wherever that I can carry a gun, or, you know, have a hot dog stand by myself. And I'm not making fun of anybody who has a hot dog stand or works at McDonald's. That's not the point. The point is I'm going to leave something that I've spent a good chunk of my life to do just because I'm supposed to carry a gun, or even worse. And here's where it's really worse. I have to carry the gun they tell me to. Well, if you don't carry at least a Glock 19, I actually had a guy write this on a forum. If you don't carry a Glock 19, you're stupid or you're lazy.
What?
Really?
That's crazy.
Really? Oh, okay. And what's your background? Oh, you're a cop. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, you can conceal it. No big deal. Oh, okay. So if you get caught carrying a Glock 19 when you're not supposed to as a cop, what's going to happen to you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll get in trouble with my boss. And, you know, you're going to get fired? No. You're going to get any financial reprimand? No. Shut the hell up. Right? Because that's not us. That's not us in the real world. You know, you're a nurse working at a hospital, and this is a job you love, right? Mm-hmm. You got a nursing degree. You spent $80,000 in college funds. You got a nursing degree. Now you've been a nurse for 8-9 years at a hospital you love. They don't let you carry a gun. You're going to quit that?
Yeah.
Really? You know, again, we have to put all our teaching, all the stuff we say, we have to make sure people understand context, right? Like I wrote something a couple months ago, and man, people lost their freaking minds. It blew up the internet, and I was shocked. I wrote something about, you know, because I sometimes carry a snub on my ankle. Mm-hmm. Because, and I said, in my situation, in this block of time that I have found that ankle carry works best for me in this situation. I didn't say everybody should do it. No. I didn't say that, you know, if you don't do this, you're stupid. I didn't say that. I was saying me, right? And people lost their minds. And I had a hard time understanding it until I realized they thought I was saying everybody should carry ankle. And the reason they thought that is because that's what most of the self-defense instructors say, right? Here's my gear. Here's what I'm doing. Therefore, you should do it. This is the AR setup I have. This is the gun I carry. This is the holster I use. This is whatever, the techniques I use. You should do it because these are the best things. No, they're the best for you. You know, and we have to understand that contextual thing. And the contextual thing is always changing too. It's not just you. You know, my Monday through Friday context is different than my Saturday, Sunday context. Mm-hmm. You know, it's, you know, that kind of thing. When I'm on vacation, my context changes, right? If I'm on vacation in Arizona somewhere, that's a different context than if I go to the UK and spend a week in London, right? Yeah. Completely different context, and it changes everything. And people have a hard time grasping that because we as instructors tend to not hit that hard enough. You know, sorry, I didn't mean to rant about that, but that really irritates me about this kind of thing. And it's always been one of my pet peeves.
Yeah, my pet peeve as well. And I think there's a couple of things. I'm addicted to context, you know, because I think that's everything. And one of the easy ways for a self-defense instructor or anybody really to think about it is, you know, make you're the weapon system, right? So if I'm the weapon system, and I know people say that all the time, and I don't, you know, people might roll their eyes at it, but I mean, really philosophically sit down and think about it. If I were the weapon system, how would I behave? And then that way, any tool that I put in my hand is just a tool with which I exert my will on someone else. And I think it's an interesting way to think of it. And it also gives you the freedom to go, okay, I can go to Europe with my family. I can go to this state. I can be on an airline and not freak out because And what's interesting, when I went to expeditionary warfare school, one of the things that they talked about with regard to special operations forces was something called ubiquitous access. They're like, this is what makes an operator different from everybody else. It's not that he's the best shooter. There are plenty of 16-year-old competitive shooters that can outshoot anybody in Gold Squadron. Okay. It's ubiquitous access, their ability to get anywhere in order to exert their will at any time and place that they choose. So in that regard, I got into like, what if I want to exert my will inside this house? Okay, well, I need to learn lock picking. Okay, what if I need to exert my will on the road? Can I use my vehicle as a weapon system? So it makes you think of all the potentialities, I guess. What do you think, Cecil?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great way of thinking about it. How do you exert your will when you come across an auto accident and you see somebody bleeding out? How do you exert your will? Oh, I don't know. Call 911. Okay, that's cool. But what if you had a little more training and a little more gear, something else, Yeah. And I always say, hey, strip me naked, set me down in a desert island. I'm not unarmed.
Right. That's exactly right.
You can't disarm me. You can take away tools.
Yes.
But you can't disarm me. My wife and kids have always joked, for years. Like, we'll go into a building that say something like "no weapons allowed," and they'll go, "Dad, you can't come in here." Then they chuckle. They chuckle because I'm just dad, and I'm a goofball, and whatever. But that's true, though. I mean, I am I am that weapon. Like you said, the tools are just another way I exert my will, exert what I need to do. It might be easier to do it with a gun. It might be easier to do it with a tourniquet. It might be easier to do it with my car.
Yeah.
But, that's still, like you said, that's a really good way of putting it. It's just an extension of your will. That's all.
We had a fight one time in a pod when I was a corrections officer. And there was an inmate that had, he was in our Tennessee pod, but he had San Quentin tattooed on his stomach, and he was a lifer. He'd been in and out of prisons all across the United States. He just happened to be in ours that day. And he's mopping the floor, minding his own business, sipping on coffee, just a, middle-aged inmate. And the minute that the riot popped off, Cecil, he didn't hesitate, snapped the broom in half and got to work with it. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm sure, it just occurred to him, I need a tool. I got a really good one right here. Check this out. Pop that broom in half and went to work with it.
Yep.
And I think in that regard, it goes to something else you said a little while ago, how a lot of self-defense instructors will say, never do this and never do that. And I have to be careful of that too, because superficially I look at leg locks and go, I don't really want to do a leg lock because I can't control the guy's hands, and I don't know what the hands are doing, and the hands are going to kill me, and I'm screwing around with his leg.
Yep.
But at the same time, there might be a contextual application of a leg lock. Berimbolo. I'm 51 years old, man. Going upside down on somebody is a little difficult, and you don't know what that is. Google Berimbolo later, Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. But there might be a time inside a vehicle or a bus or a plane where that might be a good solution to that problem. What say you, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other areas where self-defense instructors fall down is that we always look through our own prism, right? So gun guys always look at the problem through gun prism. Martial artists always look at it through a martial art prism. Well, the problem is it's everything, right? Not every fight is going to be a lethal force situation. Not every lethal force fight is going to involve guns, right? Yep. This is fact, right? I like numbers. I like reality. I don't like saying, well, this is what I think, or, here's ideas. But so we know Bureau of Justice Statistics did a study a few years ago, and they went through a few years of their crime reports, the government crime reports. And they came up with the percentage of violent crimes that involve firearms. You know what that number was? 41%. Which you go, okay, it's a lot. But what I took away was almost 60% of violent crimes do not involve firearms, which means that guy coming at you is not going to pull a gun.
That's right.
He's not going to be shooting at you. So if your context is always this guy comes at me and he pulls a gun out, puts it in my face, and I get my sub-second draw and shoot him kind of thing. And that's what you're always prepared for. Well, that's already statistically, you're missing 60% of the problem, or the potential problem. And so we have to think about this, that global context. Like I'm like you, leg locks are not my go-tos, not my thing. And for that very reason, like you said, I have both my hands tied up with this guy's legs, which means automatically both his hands are completely free. Now, if I know he's empty-handed, we're fighting in Speedos on the beach in Rio, you know what? I can pull that off. Yeah. I can do that because he ain't hiding. I guess he's potentially got one hiding place, but it's probably not going to be a particularly big weapon that he pulls out. So I can probably, in that context, go to a leg lock, But if I don't know, if I can't be sure of that has to be farther down the list of my priorities. That has to be like, man. And if I do go to leg lock, I better. The other problem with leg locks is sometimes it takes time to set it up and get it set. Yeah. Right? You got seconds while this is going on. Not like an arm bar, like a straight arm bar from a top position or even from guard. You as soon as you go into that, boom, you're snapping that arm within a second from the initiation of the move. So I've taken that, the very least, if he can handle the pain, I've taken an arm out of the fight, right? Leg locks, it's probably a longer process before you get enough either damage that blows out the leg or enough pain that he, stops his stuff, whatever he's doing. But but like you said, there's still validity to it, right? Everything in jiu-jitsu has some validity. It's just some might be way, way down here at the list, and other things like dominant positional control and rear naked chokes and guillotines and kimuras are way up here.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of, again, we can't be dogmatic about this kind of stuff. We have to think, okay, well, what's the context, right? I use this one, right? So closed guard, right? Great. There was a trend, say 2010, in the jiu-jitsu and MMA world. Closed guard is dead. Well, okay, in their context, MMA context, maybe. But here's the thing, as globally, it's not. Because what can you do in closed guard that you can't do in open guard? There's one thing that closed guard does better. It keeps the guy in. Like, I don't care what open guard you have. I don't care what open guard it is. He can disengage and move away. I don't care. De La Hiva, Spider, it doesn't matter. He can move away. How do we stop that in MMA and jiu-jitsu? The referee says, get your butt back in there and fight. Don't you disengage. We don't have that in the street, right? So let's say that the guy has a firearm. He's got a firearm. Or you're pretty sure, and you don't. Do you want him 5 yards away from you, or do you want him close into you? Right? Okay. Context: closed guard is superior to every other grounded position on the planet. Okay. Now flip it. Let's say that you're pretty sure the guy has a contact weapon, a knife, screwdriver, whatever, and you have a firearm. Where do you want him? In tight, or do you want him 5 yards away? No, you want him 5 yards. It's not closed guard is better, open guard is better. No, it's what's the context that tells you this is what I should do.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that when I ask you the question about the things that bother you with or what defense instructors get wrong, and you gave a great answer, Cecil, but I want to go back to something you said earlier and see if there's also something that they get wrong. And that is an over-reliance on, to use your terms, faith-based martial arts.
Oh,
I was a guest on a show recently, and some callers were writing in or what have you, and they were feeding me the questions. And one of them was, oh, I'm a female, and when I walk out to my car, I've got my keys in my fingers.
Oh,
and that's a great idea, Rich. And I'm like, have you ever punched a Bob or any other surface with those keys in your fingers. You know what I'm saying? Well, who taught you that? Well, the Krav Maga instructor, I'm not picking on Krav Maga. I don't remember who it was, but it was somebody. I'm like, well, I guarantee you they've never tried that either. And another woman, it was like 2 in a row, Cecil, that wrote in, all right, Rich, we got another one for you here. This person says they keep wasp spray and behind their desk at work or whatever. And I'm like, and then of course I demystified and debunked that. But I think that's what bothers me about, and I'm going to call them well-intentioned. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it's like, guys, don't be teaching people crap that you have not pressure tested yourself. What do you think?
Absolutely. That's like I said, I know that a rear naked choke works. You know why? Because I've been choked out. I've seen the stars go shooting as I faded out, and then I come to a couple seconds later going, what happened? I've done that. I've been punched a lot. Like I said, I've got the physical scars to show it.
Mm-hmm.
I teaching something that you haven't done, just saying, oh, you know what? This sounds good. This is something I can teach ladies. Really? Why? Oh,
Right.
This is going to help them. All right, here, before you teach it, try it. Or at the very least, find a woman that to say, hey, could you help me out with this? Can you help me test this thing? Before because here's what we forget, or not, we tend to, we give lip service to this, but we really tend to ignore it. We are potentially teaching life-saving skills to people.
Yep.
And if you teach them something that is not going to save their life, but you're saying it is, you are morally and ethically bankrupt. And you should be held accountable to that if something horrible happens to that person. If they were doing something you told them would work and it failed on them and they suffer the consequences, so should you. But the problem is martial artists, the self-defense guys, oh, well, they didn't do it the right way. No, BS, dude.
Yeah.
Show it to me. Like when I teach my classes, so I have I call it the graduation exercise at the end of each day, where we kind of tie everything together and we put it in that true force on force thing. And I tell people, you don't have to do the stuff we did for the previous 8.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do something else? Go ahead. You want to prove me wrong? I have no problem with that. And I tell people, if you pull something off that I didn't teach, that I don't think's great, not only will I apologize to you, I will publicly go on Facebook and my blog and everything else and tell people, hey, here's this thing I just saw a guy do and I didn't think it would ever work. And here's the thing. I don't have a problem with that at all. Call BS on anything I do, pressure test it yourself, and you tell me.
Yep.
And a reason I can say that is because I know what I'm teaching is true, because I've tested it for, 25 plus years now at this point, for sure. If not the full, I had the base for 41 years, but 25 years of really, truly pressure testing this stuff with, at this point, I calculated a few months ago, I found some of my training journals. I don't have all of them dating back to the beginning, but I calculated I've taught at least 7,000 people, unique individuals at this point. I'm pretty sure I've taught over 10,000. I just can't, because I've got there's about 3 years of training journals missing that I can't find. So I can't totally document 10,000, but I can document 7,000. So it's a lot of people to go, here's, you prove me wrong. You do something different and we're doing it. I don't care I don't care you teaching shooting. I don't care where you teaching hand-to-hand. I don't care. Teaching med stuff. You have to have done this and tested this and made sure, if we're talking about potentially life-saving skills, this has to be 100% as to the best of your knowledge, this stuff works. That's why the best shooting instructors are so good, like a Tom Gibbons. When Tom tells you, here's this, and then he gives you all the reason and the documentation and all the stuff behind it, you go, he's thought about this for 30, 40 years. And he's been doing this. This isn't something he learned 6 months ago off YouTube that he thinks is cool. I think that's important.
It is incredibly important, man. And I'm going to get to the last question. But before I do, gosh, you got me thinking about something, man. I went to a Marine Corps school. It was an edge weapons school. I came back and I'm all excited. And my fellow instructors were there. And I said, hey, man, did you know that the Kevlar flak jacket will stop a knife attack? I said, yeah, it's stab resistant. And my buddy Terry, who later got killed in Iraq, he's like, it will, huh? And he grabbed it. It was laying on the bench and he threw it on the ground. He took his K-bar out and stabbed right through it like went through butter, man. And I just remember going, holy shit.
Yep.
Here's what it did though, Cecil, and I think you probably agree with this maybe. It threw into, I may have learned a lot of really good techniques that week, but I immediately went, oh my God, everything I learned from those guys was crap. Because the minute one thing that they told me fell apart, it was like a house of cards and threw into question everything.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. If one important thing was completely wrong, how can you trust anything else? All right. Well, this guy got this completely wrong, but everything else he said was gospel.
Yeah.
Really? I remember when I first started doing seminars, like 2005, I think 2005, 2006. And people, there was a few people asking online, they'd be going, hey, Cecil, that's all well and good to do the jiu-jitsu stuff and the mats, but on the streets in gravel and on asphalt, you can't do a hip escape. You can't do that stuff. And I'm like, if you're geared up, if you're a cop or something, you're geared up, you can't do it. I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm not a cop. I don't know that. So what I did, I asked my buddy who's with the sheriff's department, in a different county from me. I said, hey, can I borrow some gear? Can I put some of your gear on? And then I did it with another guy who was in another county, and I tried their gear. And you know what I did? I rolled around on gravel, and guess what? It worked.
Yeah.
Because if you do the technique correctly, it doesn't matter. My belt, my gear is not scraping on the ground. Yeah, if you do a crappy hip escape, yeah, it's going to get caught, but that's not the gear or the situation. It's you. You failed, not the technique. But I didn't know that. I couldn't tell this or these critics, I couldn't say you're wrong until I went and did it. I had to try to do it in the situation that they said. Because otherwise, then maybe they were right. If they were right, I needed to change what I was teaching people. But I don't. So cool. I was right anyway. So it was good.
Yeah, that is good. Okay, brother, we've kept you on here for, going on 2 hours now. Thank you so much, Cecil, for your time. Hey, we've seen 2020 is absolutely bonkers, right? It's been a crazy year and a lot of lawlessness going on this year. There has the potentiality next year, I think, looking into Rich Brown's crystal ball, we've got a lot of trials coming up for a lot of police officers. A lot of them are going to get off. Cities are going to burn again. We got a contentious election going into inauguration, man. Where is all this lawlessness going in your eyes? And what can folks that are watching this morning do to better prepare themselves?
Man, I don't know. My crystal ball is super foggy about that kind of stuff. All I know is regardless of what actually happens, regardless of where your political beliefs are, you have to agree that the potential for really bad stuff can happen. You can't just go, no, everything's fine now. We're all gonna, live in harmony and everything. Come on, sorry, that's not gonna happen. So I think my belief is I think you should keep doing what I think you should have been doing the entire time. You have to prepare yourself as best you possibly can. Again, like I said, what I said that the collective became our mantra was be honest to the problem and do the work. You have to do the work. Get yourself in okay shape. You don't have to be CrossFit Games winner or, some super cardio fitness, prime of your life athlete. No, but get in decent shape, lose excess weight, get your health in order, start preparing for that. Well, is my home protected? Am I protected when I drive around in the areas, the things that I do in my life? Do I have a plan, a reasonable, plausible plan for getting through these situations? And then am I training to make sure that that plan is going to work? I've really been wanting to take that shooting class with the Seeklander or a Ernest Langdon. I just haven't done it. Well, do it. Do something now. Do it now. Yeah, ammo's ridiculously expensive now at this point. But figure out what you need. Okay, I'll use all my available ammo, do one weekend class with Seeklander. And then I'll ask him, because Mike probably, maybe he should probably know how to help me build a dry fire plan. I'm kind of thinking he's probably done videos on this at some point somewhere on dry fire and building your own plan, I think. But do that now. Don't wait. Oh, in 6 months I'll do this, right? Here's the thing. So, sometimes we get overwhelmed with having to do all of this stuff. Guys like you and I who are talking about, it's not one thing. It's not a one-dimensional aspect of the problem. It's very multidimensional. We have all these interdisciplinary things we have to think of. Sometimes it gets overwhelming. Here's the thing. Start today. Something. Well, what do I do, Cecil? I don't know. What do you think you could do today? Well, I don't have any gear. I'm stuck in my house. Okay, do 10 burpees today. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow, do 11 burpees. The next day, do 12 burpees. You know what I mean? You could start. Everybody can start something. You don't need, I'll wait till I get this gear. Well, I really can't do a dry fire program because I don't have a SIRT pistol or, what's the one that Mike loves so much?
Cool fire.
Cool fire. I don't have the cool fire thing. Okay. Well, you know what? Just do what a lot of people have done for years. Just dry fire your own gun. Make sure it's empty. Remove the ammo someplace safe. But you could do, if you have a gun, you could dry fire today, right? So just do it. Do something. Even if it's only for 2 minutes today, do it. Tomorrow, do it for 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Do it for 2 minutes and 30 seconds a day. Just start doing this. Don't let yourself get worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. Don't worry about, there's so much to do. You know what? Just get to doing the work. That's all there is. That's all we've got. It's just, nothing but time. So let's start doing it.
Excellent answer, my brother. Hey, thank you to everybody that watched today's show with Cecil Burch of Immediate Action Combatives and the ShivWorks Collective. Thank you, Cecil, for your time. I want to get to a couple of comments here because I think they're pretty cool. Paul says, excellent show as always. Thank you, gentlemen. Jara says, be safe, everyone. Mark says, I would like to see myself training with Rich and Cecil Burch on my Christmas wish list. Heidi says, great show and Simplify. Keep coloring outside the lines. Will Parker says the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time is today.
Exactly.
Mike Verley says, great summary and tips. Cecil, where can folks find you at?
You can go to my website, iacombatives.com. You can go, that's where most of my stuff are. That's where I'll put up my blog articles and I put up my training schedule, my seminar schedule, which I don't have it up yet because I'm still finalizing a couple classes left. But before Christmas, I'll have it up. So you can go on that, and my YouTube channel, Immediate Action Combatives. I try to put videos. I've been a little slack the last few months because 2020 sucks, but I've been slack. But I try to put up free content up there, just stuff I'm talking about and ideas and training tips and stuff. So you can do that, or on Facebook, Immediate Action Combatives too.
Well, thank you again, sir, for being on the show, Cecil. And if I can ever get you back for round 2, man, I think we've got a lot more to talk about.
All right, let me prepare. So when I get up at 6:30 in the morning and I have to talk, give me a couple months of getting myself amped up for it, and then I'll come back on because it was fun. I like talking about this kind of stuff, especially to guys like you who understand what we're talking about. And and are doing it on yourself. So you have your own, point of view on this. And it's really cool. And I pick up stuff from you too. So I'll do it anytime. Just give me a shout.
Awesome, brother. It's always a pleasure. Folks, stay safe out there. And remember, the fight is coming. Be ready.